The County Committee of the Whole, budget hearings will resume. Okay, and I'd like to mention that we are running behind schedule, and it reminds me of the first session that we had, and I kind of suggested that we were running behind schedule, and after that, nobody asked any questions, and we finished early, and I'm not suggesting that. We want to ask questions, we want to get things out on the table, but I would just ask people to do try to make some deliberate choices over what's strongly budget related to bring up here and what's more matters of interest about how the department runs that maybe can be asked offline. So just kind of keep that in mind. That's all. And if we have to carry someone over to another day, it's not our preference, but neither is it the end of the world. We'll roll with the punches. First up is Director of Human Resources, Douglas Dykes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I was actually supposed to be at another meeting today, so my staff, Pat Smock and Holly Woods, had prepared for the budget talks. I do have another meeting to go to, but I'm going to stick here as long as I can. But since they prepared and they've done such a great job, I'm going to ask Pat to come up and present the general budget, and then Holly to present the benefits and wellness budget.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Snuck up on there. Good afternoon, everyone. Jean was kind enough to, the clerk was kind enough to distribute the slideshow that you'll be seeing today. And if the staff would be kind enough to display it on the board, we'll start with the agenda that we'll be going through today, which includes the 3-year comparison, FTE vacancies, our 2020 priorities as a department, some cuts and asks that we were asked to make. And then, as Douglas mentioned, Holly will cover benefits and wellness, and obviously we'll be happy to take any questions at any time throughout. Our 3-year comparison, this is excluding benefits, and so you'll see changing from 2019 to 2020. There's a slight decrease in funding in 2020. That's projected cost savings from the ERP. The projected elimination of the FTEs, as you might imagine, between 2019 and 2020 may be delayed because of the implementation of the time and attendance and payroll modules of the ERP being pushed back from the original dates. We will find cost savings by not filling some open positions, which we'll talk about shortly, and those will be on subsequent slides. And then once the ERP is fully implemented, we're anticipating that we'll be repurposing some employees in various roles. We're looking to potentially add a contract administrator. HR manages about $132 million worth of contracts annually. Also, we're looking to do some additional work in diversity and inclusion and in our safety areas as well. I did mention that we'll talk about vacant FTEs. These are positions that during 2019, employees were in these positions. They've subsequently left the positions, and the positions are now open. And they include an HR manager for employee and labor relations, our business services manager, who is actually in the room. She went to work at the Board of Elections, 2 payroll officers that have left us during the year, a talent and acquisition employment specialist, that's a recruiting position, and that's under the Health and Human Services budget. And then our manager of environmental health and safety left us this year as well. That's in our workers' compensation budget. In 2020, we have several priorities. Obviously, the first and most important to probably everyone in the room is the completion of the ERP implementation. We also are looking to roll out a organizational-wide performance management system. That's currently with bargaining employees are using that. We want to roll that out to non-bargaining employees. Should that encompass any bargaining employees, obviously, we would discuss that with union leadership, obviously, ahead of time. We're looking to train 60% of our managers on leadership and supervisory skills. These are the leadership competencies that the chiefs and directors have laid out in the past, and that's one of the handouts you see that you were given that is entitled Leadership Competencies. Those include developing others, driving organizational advancement, cultivating and championing change, inspiring and fostering respect and diversity, and promoting a culture of servant leadership. And then also on a handout you have called Leadership Development Series. We're hoping to make it a requirement that in 2020 and beyond that the leaders and supervisors throughout the executive agencies take 7 organizational employee development training sessions or classes throughout the year. And then lastly, it mentions that we want to do, the slide shows 20% of our employees to take succession management classes. Or I shouldn't say classes, I'm sorry, that develop plans in 20% of our departments. And this includes identifying the critical positions that require succession planning, ensuring that the classifications, the job specs and descriptions are all accurate for those positions, interviewing supervisors to ensure that the key competencies are identified, and then building surveys to measure which one of the current staffs might be available and where their gaps are, and then working with our colleagues in the PRC to develop a selection process and identify targeted groups and persons, and putting together a development plan accordingly so that we are ready to move as employees leave particular positions, that they are ready to be succeeded by in-house talent. In 2020, we were asked by the administration to potentially make some cuts if they were required, or to name or identify some cuts if they were required. In 2020, those included a potential elimination of a position on our staff, elimination of 2 contracts that are currently ongoing. One includes the current time clock vendor, elimination of 1 temp agency worker that we have on our staff, and then eliminating the installation of 1 of the wellness centers. And Holly can speak more to this, but we are anticipating rolling out 2 wellness centers at 2 separate buildings every year. If we cut that down to 1, that would include some savings. In 2021, those cuts include, again, an additional position eliminated, additional contract elimination, additional temporary agency worker being eliminated, and then elimination of the ALEX tool. Anyone that's gone through the open enrollment, which started today, benefits open enrollment, this is our first year of rolling out the ALEX tool to help employees pick the most appropriate plan for them and their families. At the bottom, we did address some new initiatives, which included 3 new positions. Those mostly are 2 of those are in health and safety, and 1 is a leave tracking position. We've talked about expanding our drug testing to include a random drug test for safety-sensitive positions. And then we've also talked about actually expanding our temporary agencies contract. We have departments that often come to us and say they need help, they need temporary help. And without a standing contract for temporary services, we don't have the ability to immediately help them and turn that around. And so that's one of our goals in the future, potentially, to have a standing contract so departments can come to us and get temporary help immediately.
So am I correct, the new initiatives are not in the budget, they're possible?
That is correct. They're not
Okay.
included in this budget.
Okay.
Having said that, I'll turn to my colleague, Holly Woods, and she has the benefits and wellness update.
Good afternoon, Holly Woods, Director of HR for Benefits and Comp. So from 2019 to 2020, our healthcare budget overall is going down 3.65%. So we've had really 2 good years for claims and benefits, and we've made a lot of changes and adjustments as well. We've optimized plan design for performance. We have renegotiated prescription contracts and our shared savings arrangement with Metro. In addition, we've made changes like eliminating the United Healthcare plan, which is now available through MMO at deeper discounted rates. In addition, this year we have renegotiated our life, dental, and vision contracts, all resulting in either rate holds or decreases over the next 3 years. As far as wellness, the numbers that you see here are not inclusive of wellness incentive, but I'll talk about that here in a minute. There is an increase in the wellness budget. We've seen some great participation in the program, and we have increase in payouts for employees participating and earning those wellness incentives, increase in employees getting their annual biometric screenings, increase in flu shots that are provided through the county. So great participation in there, resulting in an increase in the budget.
Is the reduction in benefits and wellness partly because of this temporary drawdown on the surplus?
No. The reduction in the benefits, one, is last year we finished rebuilding the reserve. And then two, moving forward, we have, as I mentioned, all of those adjustments that we have done have resulted in lowering the overall costs of the plans.
So this thing that all the agencies are talking about, where they're going to have 14% less for health care because you're having 4 pay periods where health care charges aren't assessed. You know what I'm talking about?
I do. So there is a recommendation that we're evaluating. At this point, we have to wait till the end of the year to determine the total amount of the surplus, and then we'll do an adjustment after that point. So at this point, I can't say for sure it is a 4 pay period or 4 month. We are going to wait till the end of the year as everything draws to a close, and once we evaluate that total number, we'll look at making some type of premium hold or premium holiday for 2020.
How can this be unknown? Every director's been coming to us one after one saying that this is already folded into their budget.
So it's all based on projections. We can't sit here firmly today and say this is the dollar amount that we're going to need to fund the plan through the remainder of the year. Catastrophic claims can come in, claims that aren't hitting our new stop loss amount. So while we can project, which is essentially what we've done and we've built into the budget's contracts, we still have the rest of the year to let those dollars be finalized and adjust accordingly. And we have to do that every year. We make a projection on what we think it will be, but we want that to come to a close and have a very firm number so that we can make the final recommendation.
I don't see how you can budget for it and then say maybe we're going to do it and maybe we're not. I don't get it. But
so we do know that we have a surplus. I mean, but I can't say that it's going to be 6 pays. It's going to be 2. We project that it'll be somewhere around 4. But again, to be certain and be able to tell the departments exactly what it will be, we want to get closer to year end. So we know that there's going to be a surplus, but I can't sit here and say it's going to be 4 pay periods. That's what we're projecting.
okay, fine.
Okay. As far as wellness, we've had great participation in the wellness program. Just focusing over the last 2 years, participation overall has increased by 36.3%. Employees completing the program requirements has seen an increase in 83.3%. Biometric screening, so it's just a way of employees getting a handle on their health preventively through biometric screenings. Our participation has increased by 97.6%. And so that means employees are monitoring their health, they're getting those scores, and they're taking action on that. Overall, the incentive payout has increased. So in the last program year, we were at $384,600. It has increased this year to just over $1 million. Just note in that number that the incentive amount increased from $300 to $500 in 2019 as well. And then I want to talk about what we've learned from having this program now over the last 3 years. Often when you have a wellness program, is it effective? Is it doing what we want it to do? And is it worth it to continue? And based on the aggregate data that we have today, we can say, yes, it's been very effective. So over the last 3 years, looking at the employees that have been participating, we can see that average health scores have increased. So average health scores range from great to less than great, and they have moved from now into the from average to the good category. So that means overall, people's habits and health have increased. Employees with very high cardiac risk ratio overall has decreased. High blood pressure has decreased. And system reporting from this will help us target our messages moving forward, focusing on areas like risk for diabetes, BMI, obesity, and hypertension. So we have a nice overview of what our population is looking at for their health. We can see that health overall has increased and they've gotten healthier. And now we have some targets to help with education and messaging moving forward.
Okay.
So just want to close this out. We always like to give a quote when we close out our HR presentations. The value of an organization is a function of how well the financial capital and the intellectual capital are managed by the human capital. So you'd better get the human capital part right.
Okay. Questions? Ms. Baker.
I'm just curious, do we have any programs that are addressing anyone who smokes or has any addictions that go beyond just the normal wellness of trying to make sure that you're healthy overall? What do you do, say, for example, someone who was a smoker or is a smoker and would like to seek help?
Yes. So one thing, I was just doing a benefits roadshow over the last 2 weeks, and one of the slides in my presentation is on the smoking cessation services that we have through our medical plan. So employees and their dependents, because it's beyond just employees and their dependents have access to free smoking cessation services through our medical plan. And so as I mentioned, we were out just presenting on that and giving employees information on where they can get resources to help for that, and it's part of the plan cost. And then two other things. One, it's part of our EAP, our Employee Assistance Program that we advertise. 3, part of the wellness requirements themselves is that if you are a smoker, you go through some smoking cessation videos and other pieces. And it's also built in throughout the year as well. So there's multiple touch points and opportunities available for employees to get assistance with that.
Do you track those type of vices as you do the improvements on other health, like cardiac health and all? Do you track those that have admitted that, yes, I'd like to get off smoking and I can't, and what can you do for me? And then do you track later that you had success?
So we can pull reporting from our system that shows if they reported that they're a smoker, how many people completed the program to get credit for the program. And then I will have to double check with our healthcare company to see the utilization of the smoking cessation services, but we can also pull reporting on that from our EAP as well.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair. I have a question of the director before you conclude.
Yes, Ms. Simon.
I have a question of Director Dykes. Thank you. Just a follow-up question. When I was asking you about Scott Rourke's position and what's happening there, my colleague Brown asked, is there a legal situation? And you answered yes. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so I believe it's important for us as a council to understand what's happening with that personnel and perhaps imminent litigation matter. So tomorrow, I'm going to be seeking executive session to discuss the personnel matter and want to make sure you're available to attend. It will be at 4:00 tomorrow.
Okay, and what I'll do is I'll ask our legal director to come since he's been involved in this conversation.
Thank you. And who's that?
Greg Huth.
It's Greg. Oh, our law director. Okay, perfect. So we'll see you tomorrow at 4:00.
Okay.
Okay, thanks so much, Director.
He can't be there.
Greg is sick.
Do we have an assistant?
I will find out who will come and represent. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Okay, fine. Okay. Next on our agenda is Personnel Review Commission, Rebecca Kopczynski.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca Kopczynski for the Personnel Review Commission. Thank you. I do. Before I speak to you for a couple minutes about our budget, I do want to offer that I heard a number of directors up here today raise the issue of vacancies in their organizations. And I'd like to offer to you that I can go back and get information about all of those positions that were raised in those departments and get you an update on the status of the hiring process from the PRC's perspective. Not everything that was brought up was a classified position, but on those ones that were, I'll share that information with you so I can follow up. I'm just going to talk for a few...
We would welcome that, thank you.
Thank you, you're welcome. I'm just going to talk for a few minutes today. We were told to keep it to 5 minutes, so I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. But I do want to just start with just a general overview of our current budget. We're a relatively small agency, currently 18.5 FTEs, and about 80% of our budget is personnel costs, salaries and benefits. It's about $2.2 million right now. And you can see from this chart that the other big piece that's up there is the space maintenance issue. We have moved, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a couple of minutes. But the other smaller components there that you see represent about 7% of our budget. And that gray piece that you see in there is the capital cost, which is going to be much smaller next year because this represents the additional allocation from council for the computers that we were given money to purchase in 2018. Our proposed budget for 2020 and 2021, I'm happy to report, are going to meet our needs. It looks a little different only because the space allocation piece is not included in our current budget, and I'm going to defer to Maggie in a minute if you have more questions about this. But basically what I can tell you is we were moved out to the West Shore Professional Center in July. And my understanding is that discussions are still underway about how the space allocation is going to work. We share that space with the Health and Human Services Division of Training and Development. And my understanding is that those discussions are underway. So at some point in time, once they determine what our rent is going to be, I imagine that's going to be added back in. So I know she can give you more information if you'd like it. But that's why it looks a little bit different in 2020. But otherwise, our costs are projected to remain the same. The only difference being that the salaries and benefits have gone up 2%. I will talk just briefly about a couple of drivers. So when we were moved out to West Shore, there were a couple of things that happened. Because so much of our budget has to do with salaries and benefits, the biggest way for us to look at how to get better with management of our resources, to look at how we can become more efficient. So one of the things I wanted to point out is that when we were moved out to West Shore, we got access to a whole lot of new room that we haven't had access to before. So this is going to allow us to be way more efficient. We used to have to test, for example, for corrections officers, we'd have to do 30 or 40 people at a time. We can now do 100 or 150 people at a time with enough notice. So that's going to allow us to become a lot more efficient. The other thing is we are going to have a dedicated computer testing room. So I would like to thank council for that allocation because we are going to have a space that's all our own that we can use to do large group testing, utilizing computers, and that too is going to help make us more efficient. Another driver for our efficiency is technology, and we are moving within the next month and a half to a new cloud-based employment testing product that's going to allow us to expand our ability to use computers in testing. So we're trying to move away from paper and pencil tests. And in addition to the clerical, you can see these green circles that are on here. We have been able to do clerical, administrative, some fiscal tests and skills assessments with our current software, but we're expanding this to this cloud-based product that's going to allow us to really expand our ability to assess technical skills and IT skills, do some customer service stuff, also some legal stuff if we ever found that to be relevant to a classified position. And the other big component here is that we're going to have access to behavioral assessments for leadership and professional ability. So things like assertiveness, decisiveness, things that you would typically look for a professional position, a managerial position, we'll have the ability to utilize those as well. So we're looking to that really to help us become way more state-of-the-art, if you will, in employment testing. The other thing I want to talk about for a moment is our efforts to collaborate with HR to streamline the class plan. You've sort of seen this coming in at you piecemeal, but I wanted to let you know that this is part of a strategic effort on our part to look at this current class plan, find out where there's redundancies and overlap, and sort of streamline things so that we aren't testing for the same things all the time in different classifications. So I know that you've already supported and approved 12 clerical positions that were reduced to 4 new classifications. We had 8 IT classifications that have now been reworked into a series of 6 new positions that are IT infrastructure series and IT. We had 3 fiscal officer and 3 budget officer classifications. We've combined those and reduced that to fiscal specialists. And we have 2 current projects underway, program officers and social program administrators, where we're going to continue to look for ways to make this class plan more streamlined, more nimble, more able to respond to changes in the workforce. So ultimately serving the county's needs more effectively. I want to take just a moment, too, to talk about our revenue-generating projects. I think you've been aware in the past that we had a small project with the Village of Highland Hills where we did some job descriptions and helped them develop a classification and compensation system for them. We also did a small research project for RTA. We have 3 more projects that are in the works right now, all at various stages of the approval process to continue to generate revenue, but also to engage some regional partners and to sort of let them know that we have services that we think they might be able to take advantage of, that they're not necessarily able to acquire that expertise in-house in their organization. So 2 cities, Parma Heights and Seven Hills, where we're looking to do class and comp work, and then we're in discussions with RTA about doing yet another research-based project for them. And that's really all I had, my 5 minutes, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
And so, Director, do you have the resources to handle all the requests for testing needed for county positions in a timely manner?
We do. We continue to track that aggressively because we have been working very diligently to get those numbers down. We are at the point that I think we're running on average about 35 days between the time that a posting comes down and we're able to generate an eligibility list. I do think we're staffed adequately. If you were to ask me if there was an additional position I would like, we would very much like to have a data analyst on board, somebody who can help us collate data from the various sources of information. One of the things that we're working to ramp up and have been is our compliance effort, but we've been focusing mostly on compliance with local laws and local ordinances. We'd like to expand that to state law and to federal law, but we need more people in-house to do that. So that's the only other thing that I would ask for if we could get it.
Questions by my colleagues? You're going to get off easy.
Thank you, nice I appreciate it. Okay.
Okay. Next is Department of Communications, Director Eliza Wing.
Hello,
Welcome.
everyone. I hope I get off easy, too, like a trend. So I appreciate the opportunity to come before you to talk about the budget for communications for 2021. I've provided you all with background information on the department, highlights for 2019, as well as a visual overview of some of our platforms and products that we use to reach both external and internal audiences. I'm not going to go through those documents now because it's a lot of material and I want to keep my comments brief. So to address what I believe are the primary questions, my budget as submitted is sufficient for my department's needs. It is flat except for COLA for the staff. We are budgeted for 8 full-time positions and I have 1 vacancy which I'm planning to fill. I'll be posting for that position by month's end. And I did not present any new budgetary requests for my department that I feel need to be funded. This past year has been one focused on continuing to grow our output, new vehicles for communication, and growing our audience. We've made a lot of progress, and we keep looking for new ways to get the word out about the county's programs and services and all the great work that people do here day in and day out. And I'll take your questions.
Questions? Director, am I correct that Communications Office is the lead agency in handling public records requests?
Yes, I would say that that's the case. We work with law, a lot with law. I mean, actually, the person who administrates it is in law, so I'm not sure that we would say we were lead. We're instrumental, though.
Okay, so my understanding is that there's been a very significant increase in the number of public records requests, and my questions are what do you think accounts for that, and how is that going to impact your department?
So I would say that it has to do mostly with requests around the jail system. That's really been driving it. It has died down somewhat, though, which is great. We are working with Innovation and Performance as an example of how we work with them to streamline processes on figuring out how to make our response time, not just ours, but HR's and laws and the sheriff's office response time better. So they're looking right now at the software that we use and the processes that we use. And I believe Greg Huth came before you and talked about the fact that there was a request for funding for a software package that didn't get approved, which I do think would significantly impact our ability to respond even more quickly and more efficiently to public records requests. But that didn't come from my department.
And do you know how many of the public records requests get turned around in a week or less?
I don't, but those numbers actually are out there because, again, Innovation and Performance has been studying this, so I don't have it on hand for you, but I do believe that we have the numbers of public records requests and how they've increased and also what the turnaround time is, which I can provide for you.
Okay, so you can just get it for us.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? Okay, you're getting off easy as well.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, next on our agenda is the Board of Elections, a very important agency coming up in the year ahead. Anthony Perlotti.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Since they went so quickly, I'll take like 1 minute from each of them. Got a lot to say here. So good afternoon, Chairman Miller, President Brady, members of council. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to provide budget testimony on behalf of the Board of Elections. Prior to presenting information regarding our recommended biennial budget, I just wanted to take a quick moment to update you on the upcoming November 5th general election. It is a countywide election, so there are 59 municipalities in the election, 975 precincts, 332 polling locations. We have 849,272 registered voters eligible for this election. There are 532 candidates on the ballots. There are 71 issues. We anticipate, unfortunately, a voter turnout of just under 30%, which might be about 230,000 individuals coming out. Of that, about 70% or 160,000 will vote at the polls on election day. As of last Friday, October 18th, we have received 52,384 absentee ballot requests, which include 569 voters who came down to the board's offices at 30th and Euclid to vote. This will be the first countywide election in which voters have the opportunity to engage in a voting process that mimics the polling locations on election day. And the vote by mail ballots have already started to come back to the board. We anticipate there being a steady stream of them coming back daily. So far, we have 6,670 ballots that have been received. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get into our budget testimony. So with almost 900,000 registered voters in 975 precincts. We are the largest election jurisdiction in the state of Ohio. I am pleased to inform you that this biennial budget includes sufficient funding for the board to successfully conduct all anticipated elections in 2020 and 2021 under our current mode of operation. There are a few initiatives that the board is pursuing to enhance operations and security that could require additional funding. As you may know, our budget fluctuates significantly depending on the election year. So in 2020, we will conduct a statewide presidential primary election in March and a presidential general election in November. These elections will include candidates for federal, state, and county offices. The combined number of precincts, registered voters, and polling locations for these two elections will represent a 75% increase compared to this year's municipal elections. This will necessitate an increase in our budget to pay for more election officials, ballots, postage, printed materials, and other supplies, as well as for more temporary staff to assist in our processes. Therefore, our budget of $15.9 million for 2020 represents a 32% increase compared to this year's projected expenditures of $12 million. Our budget will be reduced to $12.8 million in 2021. That year, we will conduct municipal primary elections in May and September and a countywide general election in November. It should also be noted that Cleveland Council and Mayor are elected in 2021, which can result in more precincts and higher turnout than other municipal election years, such as this current year in 2019. No existing programs, initiatives, or services were eliminated from our 2020 and 2021 budget. The reduction to the $12.8 million in 2021 is a result of fewer precincts, polling locations, and registered voters involved in the elections anticipated for that year. A detail that I do want to point out is that we did not request any funding for special elections. While special elections can also be held in August, they are infrequent, small, and revenue neutral. The board will instead only request an appropriation for special elections if one is needed. Regarding personnel, the board currently has 91 full-time employee positions, and the 2020 and 2021 budget does not include any additions or reductions in full-time personnel. And as in past years, the budget also includes a 2% raise for full-time employees. Regarding temporary employees, our temporary staffing levels fluctuate significantly each year. We have included funding for over 750 temporary positions for the 2020 elections. And that is not poll workers, that's actually staff that comes on to the board offices to help us execute the election, and 300 temporary positions for the 2021 elections. Additionally, the wage for temporary employees will increase from the current rate of $11.50 per hour to $11.75 per hour in 2020 and to $12 per hour in 2021. The annual increase included, we included this for the first time in our last biennial budget recommendation, and it marks only the second temporary employee hourly wage increase in over a decade. Continuing this increase of just over 2% for the next 2 years ensure our pay rates are competitive with other boards of elections around the state and helps us to be competitive to attract recruits for our elections, especially as we head into 2020 when we're competing against people working for the census, which pays a little bit better than we do. We do have some new initiatives that we're pursuing at the Board of Elections. In the recommended 2020-2021 biennial budget submitted to OBM on August 29th, we provided information on a handful of new initiatives the Board of Elections is pursuing to strengthen security within Cuyahoga County's elections and to improve the efficiencies in which we administer as the largest jurisdiction in the state of Ohio. Some of these initiatives include the purchase and implementation of software and equipment mandated in all boards of elections by Ohio's chief election official, Secretary of State Frank LaRose, while others include the purchase of equipment, systems, or services we feel necessary to maintain productivity within our agency. Due to savings realized during the administration of election operations, we have been able to identify funds within our current year's budget to cover the cost of the initial purchase and installation for 3 initiatives that I will discuss. However, the funds available to us at this time will only ensure that we do not incur additional expenses during 2020. There will be an ongoing annual hardware maintenance and software licensing fees associated with these items that will first be due in calendar year 2021. While it is our intention to try to identify these funds within the current recommended base budget for 2021, it may be necessary for us to seek an additional appropriation from the County Council. The first that I want to talk about is an information technology security software licensing. So Secretary of State Directive 2019-08 requires boards of elections to enhance various aspects of its information technology systems and related security programs. This includes purchasing and maintaining additional software licenses that exceed the standard licenses provided to the majority of Cuyahoga County employees. Many of these licenses allow for data encryption, secure file sharing, and additional firewall maintenance as a direct result of the directive. We have identified money within our current year's budget for the initial purchase of the required software licenses. However, the maintenance and software licensing renewal fee is estimated to be $160,000 annually. And some of this, when the day started with Andy Moles, is some of these things that he's talking about where will his office provide some of this or will we provide for it within our own budget? The next initiative is the Elections Asset Inventory Management System. The board is required to keep comprehensive records of its voting equipment, including physical inventory, maintenance history, and deployment schedules, to name a few. The system currently utilized is antiquated and inefficient. As part of the new voting equipment acquisition provided for in Senate Bill 135, which I will talk about in a little bit, boards of elections are required to have an asset inventory system in place to adequately, tongue twister, account for the new voting equipment. It is imperative the system is in place well in advance of acquiring new voting equipment to better account for the existing equipment and its corresponding disposal while accounting for the receipt of the new voting equipment. We are in the process of securing a contract for the initial purchase, installation, and implementation of the asset inventory management system that will meet the needs of our large-scale election operation using our own funds from this year. We anticipate the ongoing annual license fee to be somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000 per year, which will first be due in 2021. The next initiative is a mail ballot verifier, which fully automates the processing, verifying, and sorting of returned vote-by-mail ballot envelopes. And since the board processes the highest volume of absentee ballots in Ohio, that this piece of equipment would pay for itself over time by reducing labor costs involved with the time-sensitive function. Although we were able to use $125,000 of this year's allocated funds for the one-time purchase of the hardware, there is an ongoing maintenance and licensing fee of $25,000 first due in 2021. And again, hopefully with savings in labor costs, we'll be able to pay for that within our current budget allocation. There are two other initiatives for which we are unable to provide an associated cost to now, and we're in the process of working to get some of these costing numbers. The first of those initiatives is the replacement of our voting equipment and tabulation system, which will inevitably impact the biennium's budget. In 2018, Cuyahoga County was allocated approximately $10.4 million of state funds for the purchase of new tabulation equipment. But per state requirements, this capital project expenditure can only be utilized for the initial purchase and installation of voting system hardware and software, with any remaining capital funds being returned to the state. These funds cannot be used for necessary costs Cuyahoga County will incur associated with training, required ancillary items, and additional costs associated with operating, servicing, maintaining, and ensuring a voting system. The board is currently in the process of evaluating certified tabulation systems with the goal of selecting a vendor by the end of year 2020 and implementing the new equipment in 2021. The total cost of required items not eligible for purchase with state capital dollars will be determined once the final tabulation system is selected, at which time the Board of Elections will request the necessary additional appropriation when we are before you requesting the approval of the new voting equipment. The other initiative presented is our Initial submission, or I'm sorry, the other initiative is the physical location for our early in-person voting operations. New legislation went into effect this year that changes the method in which boards conduct early in-person voting. House Bill 41 now requires boards to place ballot scanners at the early in-person voting location, allowing voters to scan their ballot in the same manner as voters on election day. This is a positive change, but increases the space needed to facilitate the early in-person voting process. Early in-person voting is very popular in presidential election years, and we can expect to see at least 45,000 early voters in November 2020. In the past few presidential elections, we have voted individuals on 2 floors of our building to accommodate the crowd, which is not operationally optimal. The board has been working with officials in the county's Department of Public Works on the feasibility of repurposing some of the board's and county's current space. Specifically, moving the board's vote-by-mail operations to open space at the Halley Warehouse, which would create more available space for early in-person voting at our current location at 30th and Euclid. By modifying the current first floor at the board's office, such as removing some of the walls and creating an open floor plan, this could accommodate early in-person voting on 1 floor at our building. The Department of Public Works is currently working on cost estimates for this initiative if it were to be approved. At this time, I would be happy to answer any questions the committee may have. And those last 2 slides were pictures of early voting from previous years. You can see how we're packed in like sardines and how the line goes up and down 30th. Exciting stuff.
Questions by my colleagues? I have a few.
Sure.
Did we purge any voters from the rolls this year, and if so, how many?
We did cancel voters. The exact number I can get for you, but I will say it was in the ballpark of about 30,000. And that was under the NCOA and supplemental processes that all boards of elections were required to carry out.
And regarding the early in-person voting, is it possible that you could do this both at 30th Street and at Halley, or are you allowed to only offer it at one location?
That's correct, one location. So statute says all boards can only select one location in which to carry out that function.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Just curious, are the crowds that come to vote, is it on election day that you find the lines of people, or is it all early voting days?
It's actually not on election day, so I'll go with that answer first, because on election day at the Board of Elections offices, you can only come there to vote provisionally if you had an address change or a name change. Otherwise, if that hasn't happened, we redirect you back out to your polling location on election day. Okay. So the crowds come prior to that, and it starts off, there's a little bit of a rush at the opening of early voting, which is typically about 28 days prior to the election. Then it kind of goes down a little bit, and then in the week prior to election up till 2 o'clock the day before the election, that's when it starts to peak. And in a presidential election year, you literally will have thousands of people come on that Saturday, come again on Sunday. So it's the crowds definitely are in advance of election day.
I just wondered if you gave any thought to trying to get communication out there to encourage people to go in the week before instead of waiting for the weekend before. Is there any?
So we have tried, and I think a lot of individuals know that. But what kind of has happened over the years is it becomes an event. And so there's a lot of campaigns there, and there's DJs, and just this fun atmosphere that happens, not put on by the Board of Elections. We're focused on getting the voting right, but that's what happens outside the building. So I think, which is, people will complain if they wait 5 minutes in line on election day. They definitely will stand in line for 2 hours that weekend before, because they're part of something bigger, they feel like.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question. So I remember the time when there was applications to vote by mail unsolicitedly sent out to registered voters in our county Do you remember that?
I sure do.
And then that was blocked by the state, and that would eliminate a lot of the line and congestion, which
It most
you're
definitely would.
describing.
So at the Board of Elections, we love vote by mail. It's something where, because you have multiple days to work with it, as mail or applications is heavier, you can work more hours, you can bring in more temporary staff to kind of adjust versus election day when you can't. You are correct that Cuyahoga County used to automatically send every registered voter an absentee application. They paid for the return postage of the application. Then we would send the ballot, and we would pay the return postage of the ballot. At that, I think it was Secretary Houston who said you couldn't do that. You couldn't send out unsolicited vote by mail applications. And then former Executive Fitzgerald entered into a discussion, and we come to where we are now, where boards of elections are not allowed to send out unsolicited vote by mail applications, and we're not allowed to pay for the return postage of the applications or ballots. But in even years, in the November general election, as long as the legislature funds it, the Secretary of State can send out the vote by mail applications for those even year general elections. And that Secretary of State has had the funding and has been able to do that. And hopefully we anticipate that would happen again for November of 2020.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
If you could just express the layout that you would like to see at the Halley Building, did you touch on that?
Sure, I can go a little bit more in depth on
Yeah.
that. So we're looking actually for two things to happen. One is the Board of Elections currently has office space at the Halley warehouse. We're on the first floor and the second floor. And what we want to do is move our vote by mail operation, which is different than early in-person voting, to some vacant space currently at the Halley warehouse. There is a portion or half of the fifth floor that currently, from our understanding, is not occupied. So what we want to do is take from our building at 30th and Euclid, take all that functionality and put it into the fifth floor of Halley warehouse. And this way that can all run, it would run fluidly, and it is a massive operation.
How much square footage would that add, do you know, versus what you have now?
Oh, geez. I don't know if half a floor is 15,000 square feet.
Okay.
That's a guess, but we can get that number.
All right, that would be helpful. Okay.
And then what that does is it takes those operations out of our 30th and Euclid building, which we're literally working in hallways and things like that in the presidential year. We're trying to do this, so it would get that out of there, which then opens up some more space at 30th and Euclid, which what we want to do there is, instead of having voting on the first floor in the basement, which we have to duplicate the number of ballots we print because we have ballot walls on both floors. Trying to get people up and down isn't always the easiest. We want to do it all on the first floor. And by basically knocking down walls and making it an open floor plan, we feel that we can better utilize the space and not have to use the basement for voting. Typically, in a presidential election, we will have 24 check-in stations on the first floor and 36 in the basement. We believe we can get 50 to 60 check-in stations on the first floor when you start knocking down these walls, and we can really use the space more efficiently.
Okay. Okay. Question? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We will move on to the Department of Internal Auditing. Rose Karen.
Do I advance them or do you?
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Council Chairman and council members. My name is Rose Karam. I'm normally the audit manager for our department, but I'm currently serving as the interim director. We have been established since 2010 as a form of the new government, and we are currently at 6.5 staff. We just added 2 new staff auditors this past week, and we're moving along. We will be fully staffed in about a month if council approves our new director, who will be, I guess, up for confirmation tomorrow, then we will be at 7.5, which is our full staff complement. Since you're all familiar with what we do, I won't go into that too much because you guys are very familiar and have been very helpful to our department by giving us another 1.5 people to work with. So I would like to just say that the required cuts, the 5% and 10%, we were not able to do in our department because the vast majority of our budget is dedicated to salaries, and if we did the 5 or 10% cut, we would end up eliminating one of the FTEs that you guys just gave us. So that would be counterproductive. Let's see. In the past 6 years, internal audit has identified nearly $12 million in potential cost savings and recoveries, either as overpayments made to the county or potential savings that could result from policy changes that either reduce expenses or increase revenue. On average, for internal audits, yearly expenditures of, on average, it's been about $500,000. We've identified nearly $2 million in savings and recoveries. I believe council is aware of the value of our department, and we intend to continue building on that trust. To do so, we're requesting an increase in our biennial budget. The executive recommended budget that we received does not include salary changes in the budget that were approved by the audit committee. And part of that is due to our new director, who has a different salary than our previous director. So the previous director was at roughly 103. The new director will be coming in at 145. So we have that was not budgeted in the executive budget that we received. In order to fulfill our goal, we need the staff, the tools, and the training to deliver on that. We did have 2 recent increases to staff salaries because we wanted to retain them. We need to keep the department intact so we don't have any other outflow of personnel. And I mentioned we've recently filled the 2 staff positions. One has been vacant for over a year, so now we're kind of getting up to speed. We did bring them in last week, and we've got a training program to get them familiar with the county, the charter, with our audit charter, the whole process, and we think they'll work out really well for us. And we hope that once our new director gets here, we'll be able to bring her up to speed as well. On the screen now, I have our budget. And as you can see, the bulk, all of our changes are dealing with the personnel costs. So salaries and then the associated benefits that go along with that. Our other items, contracts are pretty fixed. We have 2 software contracts, our audit software and our data analytics software. And those are already set. We're not able to make any cuts in those. Space maintenance, we can't change. Our other expenses deals a lot with our local travel, our trainings. All of our staff, except for our 2 new people, have at least 1 certification. So in order to maintain that, we do a lot of continuing education training. Let's see. And then just other fixed costs that are not really too flexible. And we have on there $653 for capital expense, which is not really much of anything. I don't know if there are any questions here. There was a question with the budget for initiatives. So I put together our little wish list of new initiatives, and that would include an intern position at $15 an hour that we would carry year-round rather than just like a 6-week period during the summer, because the learning curve for what we do is longer than that, and people would need to be there for more time than just 6 weeks to be of any use to us or to give them any additional knowledge or experience. That I don't see us starting right away, though, because we have so many changes currently. But at some point next year, we may want to do that. We're possibly an additional senior auditor position, because now with 5 staff and a potential intern, I, as the manager, have all of that to oversee, as well as doing the administrative stuff, checking work papers, keeping everything on track. So having a senior auditor step in and do some of the more challenging audits, as well as having them oversee and review the work papers of the rest of the staff would be beneficial. Other than our personnel changes, the only capital expense that we would ask, and this says we don't really need a fancy conference room like that in there. It was just, but we don't have any kind of a conference room for our department, and we're mostly open cubicles. So when we need to meet with other auditees, when we need to meet for our staff meetings, anything like that, it's all in an open space, and it's disruptive to the other employees. We've been fortunate that Consumer Affairs has let us use their conference room fairly often when they're not using it, but there's a conference room right behind our office, 4-015, that we would like to request be assigned to us, because we don't have anything for us, and that would make it so we could have our meetings with whoever we need to. So that's it.
On the additional senior auditor position listed at only $13,800, are you talking about upgrading an existing position as opposed to creating a new staff position? So you're talking about the delta in that position as opposed to a new position, am I correct?
Yes, that's correct. We would hope to promote from within if we can, because that gives the current staff somewhere to move in the department, something to work toward, rather than being in a static spot where there's no chance for advancement. And that would be like a maximum salary, so it wouldn't necessarily be that high.
Any further questions, Ms. Conwell?
Through the chair to Ms. Karam, has there ever been a time that you were unable to use the shared conference room?
Just on one Friday, because that's when their inspectors come in, so we just can't plan any meetings for Fridays.
Okay. And that's been since you guys has started?
No, we've only started doing that, I think, since I've been the interim director. Before that, it would be a search for rooms wherever.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, you're good to go?
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, next we have our Inspector General, Mark Griffin. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Mark Griffin, Agency of Inspector General. You've all been here a long time, so I'm going to try to be very quick, and I hope to do that out of respect for your time rather than a desire to move things quickly. I am always available for conversations, so I'm going to move quickly and take any questions that you want. Talk a little bit about programming and budget with the Agency of Inspector General. If I can figure out how to use okay, how do I go back? My apologies. Gene? Okay, that's all right. We'll just move on. We basically do 4 things. We do education. Thank you. Prevention and education, compliance, investigations, and then waste, fraud, and abuse. So if I can figure this out, I will move quickly through it. First, prevention education, and we do that because according to the Association for Certified Fraud Examiners, the most effective way of reducing fraud is actually proactive education. I come from a legal background, and I would have thought investigations and incentives would do it, but in fact, education is the most effective. So in the last 2-year cycle, we've done over 1,000 new employee trainings. Every single new onboarded employee gets 2 hours of time with us. We've done 5,000 in-person trainings. We've also done a plain language guide, but we know that people don't really just read plain language guides if you just put them up there. So we follow that up with ethics updates via email. And so we've done 15 of those in this biennium as well, in addition to 638 conflicts checks and 298 ethics opinions. We love it when people come and ask us questions because we really want to be preventative rather than punitive. The second area is compliance. In that, we do a variety of things to make sure that people are in compliance with our county ordinances. So in the last biennium, we've done 582 new contractor background checks, 6,900 driver's license reviews. We've also looked at whether contractors have in fact registered with our office. We found approximately 900 that may owe the county money, so we're following up with that. And we do annual ethics training for employees and make sure that they're consistent with that. But what people are really interested in, and we understand this, are investigations, reviews, and complaints. So perhaps most importantly, we work closely with law enforcement. We're continuing to work with the county prosecutor's office as well as the Ohio Attorney General on their ongoing issues. In the last biennium, and what we're planning on doing in programming going forward, is we handle complaints. We've also started a series of trending data reviews. So we've looked at efficiencies in job posting, county vehicle mileages, driver's license reviews, again, just as a suggestion. But some of our more, we've done 44 investigations in the last year, including an APHIS report, a report on nepotism with the county warden, and anti-LGBT comments by the director of our regional jail. But as part of those investigations and a part of our piece, and although we believe that prevention is important, people want to know, well, what have you saved us? So in reviewing whether our registered vendors have in fact actually paid their taxes, we identified $2.5 million in unpaid vendor taxes. We've worked with the county prosecutor's office and the treasurer's office using our debarment authority to facilitate $1.8 million in taxes. But we're also starting to do more contract audits as we go forward with our program and going forward. $504,000 for a claimed software overage, which I think we've resolved or are working there. We're continuing to review the Department of Development's $118 million loan portfolio, and we've been looking at the $350,000 APHIS grant. Again, I'm trying to move quickly. Our budget this year and coming forward, we asked for slightly over $1 million, and in retrospect, this will be the first time that we have exceeded the budget from 2013. I would note that in every single year, we've actually come in under the budget that was provided. And we care deeply about taking care of taxpayer dollars. Just as an example of that, this year, I've now been in office almost 5 years. We just ran out of the Post-it notes that were made by my predecessor with her name on it. And rather than throw those out, those are things taxpayers paid good money for. We continued to use them. We just ran out of them after about 4.5 years. So what's the budget look like? Again, it's about $1,022,000. That's $2,000 more than the AIG's budget was in 2013. So it's a steady state budget, really. We're going to continue to have 9.5 FTEs. It'll be about the same. It's a 2.07% increase, so that's slightly less than the 3% overall increase from the general fund. So as a proportion of county budget, it's actually a lesser portion going forward. And then in terms of capital expenditures, this is one piece I'm slightly proud of because we are competitive. We spent $5,000 for an e-discovery platform, while the law department spent $100,000 for one that I think is probably about the same. So we care about saving money for taxpayers. And that's really quickly going through it. So I'm here to take any questions. And I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the chance to talk about the good work that my office has done and will do with your support.
Ms. Brown?
Thank you, Chairman Miller. Just a quick question with regards to the unpaid vendor taxes. How do you identify them? Because it has been brought to my attention in my ward that we may have some businesses that have some outstanding taxes. So how does that?
So yes, so when they register every 4 years, we then review before we approve the registration to make sure that their taxes have been paid. One of the things that happens though is that then during that 4-year period, if they fall short, we'll continue to award them contracts. But it's really only at that first registration period, and then when it expires and they renew 4 years later.
So every 4 years. And then of the nearly 6 million that you've identified as unpaid, is that collected or is that just you've identified as unpaid?
My understanding is that was collected because those vendors did not get their contracts until they paid the money.
And that money goes back to?
General fund.
Okay, thank you.
It just shows up as a regular tax payment.
Okay, anything else? Ms. Baker?
Yes, and thank you for your work. I know we get our semi-annual reports through the Intergovernmental Committee, so we get frequent updates about what it is that you're doing. The claim software overages, did I hear you say you were coming to a conclusion on that?
I believe so, but we'll see what happens. There's been an exchange of emails with the vendor, and hopefully that will resolve itself. Councilwoman, it's important to me that we not have unauthorized expenditures. And the law in Ohio, I think, is pretty clear that the county is not liable if it has not been authorized either by this body or by the Board of Control as appropriate. And that is an issue that is continuing.
I appreciate your work on that. Also, you are investigating those cases that we tend to be late in submitting for approval, although perhaps services have been rendered, probably not payment. But I appreciate you looking into the reasons for that, how we can improve, and give guidance as to those departments that perhaps can do better in presenting their contracts to us on a timely basis.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna hold Director Dever for a moment, and we're gonna have a very short detour, and we're gonna ask our public defender, Mark Stanton, who's been patiently waiting for a long time, to come forward, and he has a request that relates to the space for his department, but that it cannot be done in his department. It has to be done in Public Works' department. So please tell us briefly what you're requesting, and then we have the director right here, and he's going to be able to listen to it, and as part of his presentation, he can respond to it.
I appreciate this opportunity very much. I'll be as brief as possible. I have had the opportunity to speak with a number of you relative to this one issue, and I appreciate tremendously the fact that you provided me with that time and consideration. It's very simple. Because of the beneficence of this particular body, we were able to expand our personnel to a appreciably more positive degree in the last 2 years. The problem is we still have the same space that was overflowing in 2017 when I assumed this position. And when I walked in there in May of 2017, I didn't know how they were functioning possibly proficiently, and in fact, it was a difficult task. We now have 27% more employees on the 4th floor. We have the 1st floor, which is a small 5,000 square foot section. We have the 2nd floor, and then we have the 4th floor of the Courthouse Square building. We have anywhere between 8 and 12 attorneys, depending upon the availability of space, in cubicles. These cubicles are very, very small. I've shown photographs to a number of you. You couldn't put another chair in there to interview a client. If you attempted to interview a client, and many of the attorneys have attempted to do so, you lose any sense of confidentiality. Three clients in the last 2 months have actually gotten up and left the premises, and I certainly can't blame them. We don't have the ability, those attorneys don't have the ability to review body cams, evidentiary matters that have to be displayed on screens to review with the clients. And this is interrelated with a jail problem, but that's another matter, but it still is denying access to the clients, and we're denying access to the ability to review evidence, and most importantly, we're not fulfilling our obligations to these individuals in a manner that is in fulfillment of our obligations under the Sixth Amendment. And quite honestly, just from an administrative standpoint, we're violating our duty to provide adequate facilities to be able to consult efficiently and perform our representation proficiently with our clients. It comes down to the fact that we don't have nearly enough space, but there is and Mr. Dever has been very, very generous. He brought an individual over. They spent a good number of months on a restructuring of our available space on the 4th floor. That still doesn't increase the square footage. You're also going to have displacement of anywhere from 12 to 18 people over a long period of time if you reconfigure the space. That's a cost that Mr. Dever indicated to us was $450,000 just for the project itself. You have to also talk about the cost of placing these attorneys and staff in another area. They couldn't be in the building because there's no other space in the building to do that. Secondly, that money is not reimbursable to the county, that $450,000. However, if in fact other space in the building was available, and in fact there's 3,699.75 square feet on the 3rd floor, where one guy is sitting there, and I don't know what he's doing, but he's been there. He's been there for 14 to 18 months. Nobody knows what he does. Nobody knows why he's there, but I think his name is Ralph. I don't know. You can't get in there. The custodial supervisor, with whom we talk on a daily basis, he's not allowed access to the place. He has to go through the kitchen to get in there and clean. So there's 3,699.75 square feet there being housed by one individual. There's at least 8 offices. There's a large conference room. This would certainly be the perfect remedy for our problem. But secondly, and equally as important, I would think, that money, or excuse me, that rent generates income for the county. It's at a 70% reimbursable rate from the state public defender. That's already in effect, folks. That 70% has already gone into effect. That part of the budget, it's 90 days after the budget was approved. We're past 90 days. And some of our expenses are already being reimbursed at 70%. So I would certainly think that on a variety of scales here, that it's not only the necessary thing to do so that we can fulfill our obligations as attorneys, but I also think that it's a great benefit to the county. Again, I want to reiterate my appreciation to Mr. Dever and his folks at Public Works for the manner in which they've approached this. But I really, truly think that a restructuring is less than ideal. I think it's fruitless, quite honestly, but that space is available. I know it's available, and we just need to ask Ralph very nicely to move on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, we're going to bring forward our last person for the day, and you can give your general presentation, and at some point you can comment on what the public defender brought to our attention.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael Dever with the Department of Public Works. I'm very happy to be before you today to present my budget. I will make some general comments on what the public defender had just said, and I think we're working towards a solution or a resolution to that issue very quickly here. Following Council Miller's format and keeping all presentations no more than 3 to 5 minutes to allow for discussion follow-up, that's what we'll do. The Department of Public Works annual budget is approximately $123 million with 570 staff. That includes the road and bridge, which is the former county engineer section, the sanitary engineer section, the facility section, and a few smaller groups, which include the county airport and the animal shelter. The revenue portion of my budget is made up of special revenue funds, which include the gasoline and vehicle licensing fees, sewer fees via the tax duplicate, enterprise funds, general funds, which cover facilities and the facilities capital projects. The expenditure portion of my budget includes a 2% cost of living increase and a 14% reduction in employee health care cost. The facilities capital plan in budget years 20 and 21, the facilities capital improvement plan focuses on critical sustainment projects to first, repair and replace building systems needed for county operations, and 2, code compliance repairs and improvements. The jail repair program, the capital plan also assumes the administration's continued focus on the downtown jail facility and a continued general fund reserve funded repairs program meant to conduct work targeted towards furthering the recommendations of the ACA and areas of emphasis in the state's regular inspection that pertains to facilities. Overall, we are not reducing or eliminating any existing programs, initiatives, and/or services. We are expansion of various road and bridge programs with the addition of the $5 permissive fee in January of 2019 and the gas tax in July of 2019. We're also continuing to reach out to communities to identify sewer services that we may be able to provide to them. So with that, if there's any questions on the Public Works budget.
So could you respond about the public defender space?
Yes. So Mr. Stanton has been very patient trying to find a resolution to this. We, as he did say, we sent a consultant over there to kind of lay out his space again to try and make it convenient to fit all of the people that he has within his area. That cost to do that work is in the range of around $450,000. As I had said on our capital improvement plan for this year, we're really looking at life safety items, and that's specific in our capital improvement plan. So items that are system related and or life safety, should I say. Those are our primary focus in our capital improvement plan this year. We do have emergency dollars within our capital improvements plan of $500,000. I would prefer to hold those items for any emergency that tends to come up throughout the year. We're coming into the winter months. But we'd like to try and identify a way to help the public defender. We are looking at that space on the third floor, and I'll be in contact with the sheriff very shortly and see if we can find a resolution to it to try and accommodate Mr. Stanton.
Okay, keep us posted. Questions by my colleagues? The chairman of the Public Works Committee.
Thank you,
Councilman Tuma.
Thank you, through the chair, thank you. To the Public Works Director, have you identified who this Ralph is, or this individual?
Actually, I have not personally identified this person, but I'm going to, that space right now is assigned to the sheriff's office, and I believe that there's a task force of a few different individuals from not just the sheriff's office, but other areas that utilize that space.
Okay, and it sounds from your presentation that Public Works would not be opposed to the request of the Public Defender's Office for that space up there.
Well, of course not. And I mean, if we could help the Public Defender, one of the issues with the Justice Center, and I consider Courthouse Square as part of the overall Justice Center, is we are limited in space. And you know, even though we did purchase the Cleveland Police Building a few years ago, Cleveland Police are still housed in that facility, and we were looking to utilize that as swing space or space for other programs. So until the Cleveland Police ultimately move out of that space, we're still kind of we're somewhat landlocked, or should I space locked.
Okay. Okay. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Conwell, followed by Shran.
Through the chair to Mr. Dever, or really the law department, are we liable for lawsuits for this, for the residents not being able to have their appropriate space to conduct their?
Legally liable, I cannot think of something at this point, but I think the overall goal is to achieve workable, accommodating space. Rather than go that route.
But if I'm not mistaken, I think the 450 is going to cover the employees. The plan is for the employees to be more comfortable versus the constituents that are needing that type of service. And I just want to, that was my understanding, that the $450,000 would be more to be a workable space versus then looking at the other areas or issues that are that will affect the clients themselves. And I could be wrong, but that's what's my understanding.
I'm not aware of what the discussions that you had or what you might have heard, but
Well, you're a lawyer, so
Yes. Does the county have a legal liability? Are you asking that? I've not researched that question, but I think we're definitely seeing the problem, and we want to pose a solution and work together for that solution.
Thank you.
Councilman Schron.
If I understand at least the mechanics of what it is, we're looking at spending $450,000 to do an administrative study and possible layout of a floor that we're currently existing on. Some of that money, or none of that money is reimbursable. And if we spent that same $450,000 on the floor that's adjacent to it, 70% of that would be reimbursed to us. Is that, if I'm understanding the mechanics of how that works, is that correct? If we spent the exact same $450,000 on the floor, if it's unoccupied, we would get 70% of that back.
So I see this as if we can capture that floor, the third floor, and then rework that space also. I'm suggesting that we'll probably be doing reworking of some space in his current suite now, where the public defender is, so that they can have these separate confidential rooms for attorneys and for their clients. And then the space down below, I think we can get this done within that $450,000. Okay, so plus then it's reimbursable space into the future too.
Right. So, I mean, realistically, if I just in my simplistic way, if $450,000 is 100% non-reimbursable, theoretically, you could almost spend $1.5 million and you'd be at the same exact spot, because you're going to get that money. You're going to get more than that money back.
Right.
And I'm not advocating spending that. Please
Sure.
don't write. Oh, she's not there. Good. Okay. But the point being is that you're going to get 70% of that dollar back, at least at some point along the way. Is that? That's my understanding from the state, assuming it's a legitimate way to justify it. And I think it would be pretty easy, having done that for a living for a while, that you, in my earlier life, having confidentiality with your client is really critical from that standpoint.
I think we're driving to a solution here, and I think
Fantastic.
it's going to happen.
Well, now, switching gears, and you would probably be remiss if you didn't at least hear me asking the questions about the efficiency and economic drivers of the ERP system. The good news, bad news is you guys were the first ones to come on board, so that's the good news. The bad news is you're the ones that are going to be held accountable for. You were at least telling this body that you're seeing some cost savings and reductions and possibly revenue enhancements, because we're able to do additional services for other communities as a result of the iPads that we've got out there in the field and all the other monitoring. I don't see that showing up in the budget.
No, I haven't shown that in the budget yet, and I think one point that we were very clear about is the ERP, as it moved forward here, we needed to see all of those modules in place, the procurement module and the purchasing module, the HR modules, all in place. And I know there's been a delay in the program overall being rolled out here, but I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And
we hope it's not a train coming at us, as the old joke goes.
Sure. But I think once the entire program is in place and running, I think we needed a little bit of time, and then we were going to start to see the difference. But I can say we are seeing difference now. Response times are changing. And the point I'm making about continuing looking for other communities that need sewer services.
Right.
You know, we have to be selling ourselves at all time. We have to look like we know what we're doing, and we're productive to those communities that we currently service. And I think we're doing that, and that in turn, I think will attract other communities to come to us.
The reason why this is so critical, Director, is because you folks are up online. You're setting the benchmark. You are hopefully going to be the gold standard, that we're going to be able to show revenue enhancements and cost reductions and more efficiency of product when we go out to service our customers and clients. So when it moves over to Health and Human Services, and they're using the same kind of tablet concept, and we're doing the same thing to do field work for for those in need, that we're going to get that same, hopefully, multiplier effect. So I don't keep I'm not putting the pressure just on you, but you guys are the ones that you're the ones that we're going to be looking to. And yeah, we're going to be going live with this thing this summer. We hope, or by this next summer. And so by all means, that'll be the second year of your budget. Let's try and knock it out of the park so that when we move this over to these other departments to follow exactly your model, that we can show some efficiency and savings, because we got $34 million to make up at this point in time, and I don't want to put it all on you. I'd like it to come through other departments. Thank you.
Understood.
Miss Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Followed by Baker.
Just want to go on record and ask if there are any major leases that will not be renewed for the upcoming budget. I know 5 years ago we were at risk for DSAS, so that's first and foremost. I want to make sure that's going to remain the same.
Mm-hmm. So that's on our radar as one of those outlying leases coming forward very soon here. We'll be looking for directions from HHS in regards to their model of providing services. So once again, we're just the lease. We negotiate the terms of the lease, and then in turn, but we need to hear from the client themselves. And the client is HHS to tell us, yes, that's our model. We're staying there. We need the exact amount of space. So then in turn, we're negotiating the next step. Do there need to be improvements there, whatnot? So it's very much on our radar.
So you can't confirm nor deny whether or not that will remain?
I'm working towards yes, it is.
Okay. And I would like for it to be yes, it is, of course. I think you know where I stand on that. The other is, are there any other potential large leases looming that might impact services as it relates to this budget that you can share with us?
Well, Cleveland Police, it's a 1-year lease for them to stay with us and then to go. So we're still waiting to hear if there's any activity on that side, or will they be part of the overall Justice Center discussion? I don't know yet. But outside of that, no, there is leases looming, I believe, in 21 and 22. But we're on top of those, and so we want to make sure that there's plenty of time so they can come before you again for consideration. So I don't see anything. Director Perlotti had made mention about the BOE and their needs, and we're working towards that effort too to make it a little bit easier for early voting. So we're working hard on that, and hopefully we'll have a solution for him. And then as for transferring over to the 5th floor at the Halley, we have some programming considerations right now with another unit that may go in there. So we're going to work through that also, but I hope to have a solution soon.
All right, thank you very much.
Sure.
Councilwoman Baker.
Thank you. Just to go back to the public defender, I think at least in the conversations I've had, it sounds like he's making a pretty good argument for that floor, and he's covered the cost of doing it. And I think maybe even more important than that, we need to know who is on that floor and who's paying, to be there, and, how is it being used if there's questions about that.
Right.
So, I'll leave it there, but I do think there's enough questions raised there to investigate and hopefully lean towards fulfilling what he has laid out to be an issue for him, given the extra personnel that we did allow him to have in the last budget.
Right.
My second question, unrelated to that, is I've been curious since the executive budget report came out about a $20 million climate change that was included as part of an overall budget. And I realize this is only a 2-year, which would mean that is a $4 million per year. Mm-hmm. And I know there's $1 million of that's in some additional trees for $2 million. But what is the other $3 million in each budget devoted to when it relates to climate change? And I know we got a very basic projects that support the goals and objectives at plan, including transit-oriented development, bike walking trails. But what specifically are we spending $3 million on outside of the $1 million in trees that was brought to our attention?
Maggie Keenan, Office of Budget and Management. So the broad answer is that we don't have all the specifics yet. That's something that we're still working on because the climate change plan, we're now bringing all the partners together. But we have the $1 million for the trees. There's a certain amount of money set aside, and I'll have to get back to you on this, for charging stations for electronic, cars. Trails and bike paths, when we can do that, we're trying to work that into, it's my understanding at least, that we're trying to work that into any road and bridge projects that we're doing, if it's possible to incorporate that. And then the big one is going to be in Department of Development. So transit-oriented development, making sure that we are, I don't want to say we're going to be requiring certain things from the people who we give loans to, but I think we are probably going to talk about that and strongly encourage that we talk about green building. And this is not my area of expertise, so that's the only example I'm going to give. But those kinds of things, so that we are working that into all of our development efforts. But we do not have the details yet that would add up to a total of the $4 million each year. I can report back on that on a regular basis as we get those details.
Would these dollars be out of the sustainability budget?
No. So the trees are coming out of the Planning Commission's budget. That's where we've allocated that. We will be doing some transfers probably next year from planning to the Soil and Water Conservation District, because they're a part of that. Some of that will probably come out of the Road and Bridge, the Combined Road and Bridge Fund, if there are eligible expenses, Department of Development, Economic Development Fund, maybe some general fund dollars, but the general fund impact, my understanding, is going to be minimal outside of the trees. That's their $1 million contribution. So it's going to hit a lot of funds. It will probably not hit sustainability at all. They're coordinating those efforts. I know they're trying to wrangle all the partners together, but we are not going to transfer $20 million to that budget and say go.
All right. And is this a new program starting with the trees of a year ago?
It is. So I'd have to get back to you, but I don't know when the climate action plan was finalized, but I think it was in 2019. Yeah. So it was earlier this year. Maybe it was around the state of the county. I think that's when the executive unveiled it. And so that's why we're saying we don't have all the details yet, because this only came out really a few months ago. They want to make sure they do it right. They want to get all the parties at the table. But it is a new program, yes. And we have committed to, the executive has committed to 5 years, the $20 million over a period of 5 years.
Okay, but you will update us as these proposals come before us?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Miller, but this body is only committed to $1 million for one set of trees.
That's correct. So this body.
We have not committed to $5 million worth of trees.
No. And
Yeah.
we're right. And so you've only committed to the $1 million for 2019. So we are asking for the $1 million in each year of 20 and 21 in this biennial budget. But you're correct. So far, the only commitment from council and appropriation has been the $1 million in 2019.
With that, so that means that even though this is in here, the $1 million over the next 2 years, which is $2 million, that still has to come back to us for approval, or are we giving approval by saying yes to this budget?
So by saying yes to the budget, you are giving the authority to spend, but there is going to be another opportunity, and I don't know whether it's Board of Control or Council, because I don't know how they plan to actually get the money out there, but I don't think that the county is going to be purchasing trees. Do we know? So I think the money is going to go out to a vendor. So either council will be approving contracts or the Board of Control will be approving contracts. So you will have another opportunity to say yay or nay. What you're saying right now, if you approve the budget for at least the $1 million as is that you're like on board with this initiative, you agree in principle in the premise, but then we have to come forward with the more details. So there's a second step to actually planting a tree.
Okay, all right,
Okay, Director, how much money is included in the budget itself for capital improvements for facilities?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, the spend for this year, I believe, is $6.8 million.
Per year?
For this year, yes, and I'm fairly certain the following, the next year.
And in addition to that 6.8 million, is there additional capital money that's expected to be spent but is not budgeted and would come out of reserves, or does the 6.8 million per year cover it?
Well, it's the 6.8 million now, but things can happen throughout the year here, so there may be a request coming back in the future, but the budget as it is right now is $6.8 million.
So I want to say included in the 6.8 million is 500,000 for, the director qualified it as emergencies. It's kind of to be determined projects. I just want to say, if you're talking about giving money to either the public defender space or Hallie for the BOE, I would request that we not take it from that 500,000 and just bite the bullet now. We always have the to be determined projects that come up every year that are completely unanticipated. So I would not take it from that line item. And the capital plan for facilities does not include anything for the Justice Center aside from like routine maintenance, right, for code violations. So there's nothing in this budget for a new Justice Center.
Understood.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you, everybody, for hanging in there long, there being nothing further to hold our attention. We stand adjourned.